Welcome to Toot Your Own Horn Music Matters. Today I am with Lauren Sevian. I am so happy to have you, Lauren.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here with you.
I can't wait for you to share with our audience how you chose your instrument. I would love for you to start from the beginning.
Sure. So I initially started playing saxophone. I was around 8 or 9 years old, and my older brother played saxophone. So, of course, I wanted to do everything that he did. And we had an extra instrument at the house. My brother had just gotten a new saxophone, so they gave me his old one, and it was an alto. So I played alto pretty much from the age of 8 all through, school, elementary school, junior high school finally. And I really liked the alto, but I didn't love it. And I knew I wanted to play saxophone, but I didn't really want to play tenor. At the time when I had tried to play the tenor, I think it was the B flat. The fact that it was in B flat really threw me for a loop. And it was very hard for me to transpose at that point, because I was just so used to hearing an alto key. And I remember talking to my teacher about it. And I didn't realize this at the time. My private teacher, 𝘔𝘔𝘶, he was primarily a baritone player. But in our lessons, he always played alto. So I just assumed he played alto. And then he said, well, Lauren, I'm actually a bari player. And I said, really? Okay. And I, of course, really, I really look up to him and respected him. So when he suggested that I try the bari, I initially hesitated and said, what, are you crazy? That thing's massive. I don't want to play that big. And he said, I have this feeling that it's your voice and you should try it. So when he said that, it really stuck with me, like my voice. What does that even mean, And I think I was about 16 at the time.
Mhm.
And I just remember trying out my school's baritone, and that was it. Like once I tried the bari, I mean, I still had to play alto in school for a lot of different bands and groups and stuff like that, and also outside of school. But I started to play more bari, and I remember getting into all state jazz on baritone and different groups, and I wound up auditioning for a music conservatory at Manhattan School of Music on the bari and got in. And so that pretty much sealed the deal. And I said, well, this is going to be my voice. This is going to be my instrument. And many saxophone players play all of the saxophones and play them all very well. I can play the other saxophones, but I just really don't want to. I just want to play the baritone. There's something, I don't know, there was something that just really resonated with me with the instrument. And I've been doing it ever since. So, you know, never looked back and really stuck with just playing the bari. I mean, I would have some gigs here and there where I'd have to play tenor or alto, but I really wanted to be known as a baritone saxophone specialist, if you would. And then after I graduated in 2001, went on to play with a lot of different groups. I did a lot of big band work, continued to do that as well. Small groups, whatever, horn section stuff. I feel like I've so far had a pretty diverse and fruitful career as a performer, and hopefully that continues.
Cycling back, was your family musically inclined?
Yeah, so as I had mentioned earlier, my brother plays saxophone. He plays everything pretty much. He's one of those people, he just picks something up and just figures it out. My parents, my mother played piano, and she actually taught me how to play piano from a young age, and that was actually my first instrument. Started on the piano, I was about 5. And, you know, my mom gave me piano lessons until she said, all right, you need to have like a quote unquote real piano teacher. But I think that was just code for she didn't want to do it anymore. And my father, he played violin, but when he was like getting older, he kind of got away from it. But he's such a huge jazz fan. And it was because of him, I really got so sucked into that music because he had all these recordings and said, oh, Lauren, you got to check this out. And it was Miles Davis kind of blue, or he loved Dave Brubeck, Thelonious Monk, John Coltrane. And then between him and my saxophone teacher, I remember my saxophone teacher would make me these at the time, cassette tapes, right? So he made me these cassette tapes of, it'd be like Charlie Parker and Dexter Gordon, and you know, it was just this really cool mixtape. And of course, I had no clue what any of this stuff was, but I just thought it was so, I really gravitated towards jazz and really fell in love with it at an early age.
How was it that music became the thing so fast?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I did have other interests in school. I mean, academically, I always did pretty well in all of my subjects, but I just didn't really want to do anything but music. I knew pretty much from the time I was 12, 13 years old that I wanted to do something in music. And initially, I wanted to I wanted to get my music ed degree. So before I got into Manhattan School of Music, I actually was accepted at Hofstra University, and I was going to go there. And my plan was to get my ed degree, and I wanted to teach public school, teach high school,
Mhm.
and I guess just kind of like more of a stable, quote unquote, stable job choice, if you will. But then a lot of things started to shift for me further on in high school, my senior year of high school, and some of the groups that I was able to play with, like these Grammy bands and the All American Grammy Band, and the director of the regional tri state Grammy Band, Justin Chocho, was at Manhattan School of Music at the time. And he said, "You have to come and audition here. Like, you should be in New York City playing." And it was really because of him that I did a pretty, I mean, I had my deposit in at Hofstra, it was like, I was all I had my whole thing set, ready to go. And then, a complete change of trajectory. But I'm very fortunate because my parents, my family was so supportive of me in wanting to really go for it, you know, like move to New York City and try to break in on the scene. And that's what I just decided to do, and I was very determined, like, whatever that actually even means, breaking into the jazz scene. I think sometimes, it's easy to say, "Well, if I do A, B, and C, I'm gonna get D," and that's not really the case, as we know, when it comes to any kind of endeavor that I think has any sort of artistic spin to it, that, "Oh, I wanted to be the ultimate freelancer," which I I feel like I was for many, many years and continue to be, except now that things have come full circle and I'm teaching here at Berklee. I always enjoy teaching. So I
Mhm.
think, just to answer your initial question, like, I knew I wanted to teach and I was good at music. So why not be a music teacher? And everyone really supported me in that, like, "Oh yeah, you'd be a great teacher." But then I wound up going into the performance thing first, and then the teaching kinda came along with that. So,
How was it to make a living in New York being a baritone specialist?
I mean, not easy. Like I said, I kinda had to stick to my guns because I get called sometimes like, "Oh, can you play tenor on this gig?" And da da da, and I said, "No, I really don't play tenor." And I did here and there, but I never felt comfortable because I just felt like it wasn't really showcasing who I was and also what my strengths were. So, I didn't wanna go to a gig and play an instrument that I felt like I wasn't that strong on, and then it winds up being the word on the street, like, don't call Lauren, her tenor playing, eh." But I said, "No, call me on Barry, I could actually play that."
Yeah.
Um, it's hard, especially after COVID, you know, that that really had a huge impact on a lot of people. And I was finally feeling, after all those years, like, right just up to where lockdown was, I had a steady stream of gigs, like in town, out of town, and I'd look at my calendar and be like, "Wow, I don't have many days off," and then feeling like, "Wow, I finally made it." And then COVID came and literally just wiped everything away, you know?
As it did for everyone.
Yes, exactly. Well, that's a great point. I remember you know, my husband and I were sitting around saying, it's like, listen, Pat Metheny isn't even on the road right now. So it's like, you can't really feel that bad, but that was tough, you know?
Has it rebounded? Has it recovered or what?
Yeah, I mean, to a certain degree, I do think so because if I go out to shows or I play at clubs, people want to be out. And I think one trend I have noticed is that, because I think people were at home or working from home and, you know, people's lifestyles in general, I think were starting to shift. And I did notice a lot of clubs, their sets are much earlier than they used to be. So, for example, like Dizzy's Club, their sets are at 7 and 9 now, where they used to be much later. Vanguard, I think, probably, moved their set times up as well. So it seems to be that maybe things are starting a bit earlier, but there were some clubs like, I play with the Mingus band, and the place where we had our residency never reopened. So that was pretty tough, the Jazz Standard, because we had been there for, I think, like 11, 12 years or longer. So that was a tough one. And we've had some residencies since then, but nothing has really stuck for longer than a year or so. So, something hopefully will come up, or maybe a new place will open. And that's the other thing. I think what happened was there are new places that come up in the places that sadly didn't reopen. So I do feel like, though, it did kind of take a minute for New York to come back, you know.
Well, it's pretty hard. I mean, it really impacted music a lot. Music took a
Yeah.
burn down, unfortunately, through COVID. Our part of the music industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely did.
What do you tell your students? How do you talk to your students about trying to make a living in music in New York City?
Well, I say to them, if you want to come to New York, you should come to New York. Don't let what anybody says to you scare you or intimidate you about the business. And I find that, because I have, one student right now who, she was, since day one that I met her, she said, I want to move to New York City and I want to play, and I said, great. I said, you have that's your compass. I mean, I'm real with all my students. I tell them, listen, there's not really a formula. There are things that you want to do to just put yourself in the best position possible, numbers wise, but you have to be willing to do a lot of stuff to get to, that next level, you know? So if somebody really wants it, I tell them you have to keep that at your core as your compass, because there's gonna be a lot of stuff that's gonna try to knock you off your trajectory, you know? The other thing I do just say to them and warn them about is, just if you're used to a certain type of lifestyle and that's really important to you, New York, listen, you can get everything in New York, but it's a really tough place. So if you're not used to certain things like taking the subway, or the weather, if you're just like, I'm going to be miserable because it's like cold and snowing and all this stuff, and that's going to really hurt your mental and keep you from doing what you need to do, then that's something you have to consider. And I think that's important, because a lot of people go into the situation with blinders on, just think, oh, I'll be fine, meanwhile they hate it. Why are you going to stay someplace that you hate? You're going to have to find something. But when I see my students move there and they start, playing gigs, or they get, certain jobs or whatever, and that just makes me so happy, because things are working out for them, you know? And for me, that's like, if I had anything to do with that, that I could die happy. You know what I mean? Because that's why we play music. It's just to help and to heal and to foster, the whole point of this music is to pass the torch, pass the baton. I love playing gigs. Like, I love playing with my band. I love playing with other bands. I'll never stop loving that. But I play music because I want to make a difference in people's lives. I'm not saying that performing doesn't, but you know what I'm saying. It's just that for me, education and mentorship is really important to me and always has been. And especially at this point in my life,
What do you think about expanding students' perspectives and being willing to learn how to repair instruments or learning how to
Oh,
instruments?
it's so important. I mean, we deal with that here at Berklee because there's, I would say, a lack of places for students to go to get repairs, and most of the places they're always backed up, you know? So if that's something that interests you at all, there is a need for that, you know? So like maybe you want to play gigs, right, at night, but if you know how to repair instruments, that can be your day gig, right? And that can support your, you know, your your gig economy basically. I mean, it's hard to do it all, but I think there is such a need for that. So even just like knowing how to deal with little fixes on your instrument is very beneficial, to anybody.
Well, we probably all need day jobs, right? I mean, you at some point probably had to figure
Yeah,
that out too, right? For some,
yeah. I mean, I graduated in 2001, right before 9/11 happened. And I always say, to me, it was kind of similar what I experienced after 9/11 in terms of the gig economy. It was very similar to COVID, but things kind of came back a little faster. But it was similar in that, like, basically all the gigs I had on my calendar for that rest of that year gone, except for this one gig. After, just going through a bunch of my savings, and I said, I can't sustain this. And I wound up getting a job it was actually, I wasn't doing any repair work, but it was at a string repair shop near Carnegie Hall in Carnegie Hall Tower. And I remember going for the interview. It was up on the 54th floor of this giant skyscraper building, and I really had a nice chat with the owners, and it was like an office manager kind of job. I just answer the phones, make sure stuff is like clean, you know, basically just be like the face of the office when people came with their instruments. And it was great because I would go in like 3 or 4 days a week. Every once in a while, they needed me to be there 5 days a week, but sometimes they would, you know, technically I had to work from like 10 to 5. But sometimes it'd be like 3:30, 4 o'clock, and it would be slow in there. And so they said, all right, Lauren, you could go for the day, but they would still pay me. So I basically got paid to sit around and answer the phones, which was great. I mean, I would sit there, I had my newspaper and I had my coffee, and and I would just like answer the phones, take messages, and hang around and talk with people and go home. And I did that for like 2 or 3 years until, the gig started to kind of pick up. And then right around that time was when I started playing with the Mingus band, and they had a lot of like, at that time they had a pretty active touring schedule and a weekly gig, you know. So I started subbing in that, and that started to lead to other things. And then, eventually I left that job. But that's the other thing I say, like, don't you feel like because you have to take a job that's not maybe exactly related to what you want to do, that somehow makes you a failure or diminishes what you're trying to do as a musician. Like, you have to eat, you have to pay rent. Living nowadays is not cheap unless you have some kind of trust fund or money situation or a free house. I mean, and if you have that, that's great, you know, but most of us, you have to figure it out. And that's what I did, you know. And then there were lots of teaching gigs that were just mentally very grueling, physically very difficult. I've lived kind of pretty much all over the New York City area, but I remember when I lived in the Bronx, and I still had this teaching gig in Brooklyn, and I would be on the train like an hour and a half, you know, 3 days a week to go and make like not much money in the grand scheme of things, but I had to do what I had to do, just to hustle and put some money in my pocket, you know? So I never sugarcoat it with my students, and I share with them what I experienced so that they know. I feel like if I say, oh, I did this, and I tell them that, it makes them, it's like a little comforting, because I think sometimes, and you see certain things, especially on social media, and you expect like, oh, suddenly you're gonna have this, like, your career is just gonna take off because you did these things, and it's not the same for everybody, so it's very easy to get discouraged, but if you want to come to New York, you come and you find your people, and you find that your niche, and that's the same with any place that you want to go.
Do you think that musicians are interested in learning more skills to stay in the trade as opposed to having to take day jobs these days?
I have a lot of students who they easily could be performance majors, but Berklee offers a lot of many different majors, So a lot of I'll have students, they want to do like film scoring or music production engineering, electronic music production, music ed, music therapy. There are so many avenues now versus like when I was in school, it was like, well, you could teach or you could play. It was kind of, or you could write music, but it was more, that's like more specialized, right? So I do find that students want to play, but they're also interested in other things. And at Berklee, basically, like if you're not a performance major, you get 2 years of private instruction, and then that's it. You don't take any more, like, you don't take private instruction. You can take, like, I think, like, labs so that you're still playing, but you don't get that like private lesson that you got before, Tell my students, you can always play. You can always find places to play. If you have friends and you have people that you go to, you know, you can figure out a way to make it work. But yeah, I do find that a lot of students, at least what I see here at Berklee, they're interested in many of these other things, not just playing music.
What do you think the future of instrumental music looks like?
Well, I think as long as we keep it like from a young age, you get into elementary school and you pick an instrument and you play in band, you learn how to read music, you do all of those things that we did, as long as there's access to that, I don't think there's anything that can quite replace the physical connection that you get when you play an instrument, regardless of whether or not you're a professional musician. It's interesting. So like I'll talk to people who maybe used to play and don't play anymore, and they lament and they say, "Oh, I wish I still played." And you could, if you got that saxophone collecting dust in the corner. I mean, especially now, like you just go onto YouTube and there's like a million ways you can learn how to how to play. Maybe not all of it is great, but I think because we have so much access now, especially to information and technology, that that really is going to help continue. I think as long as we're open to the evolution of that, the interest in instrumental music we can sustain that, because I know definitely during COVID, and a lot of us saw this firsthand when, we had to have the playing masks, and, it really turned off a lot of kids to music, sadly. My brother teaches high school band, and I mean, his numbers still haven't rebounded.
Right.
And it makes sense because all of those kids were like during COVID, they were all in like sixth grade or whatever, right? So that's a huge turnoff. So I think we have to be kind of patient in terms of that rebounding, and not thinking it's going to rebound immediately. Like there are a lot of festivals, like there's essentially Ellington Festival and these kinds of things. As long as that keeps happening as well, and that those days are so much fun for the students. If we can just promote it as you're going to have fun doing this and learning this music, I think we're going to be all right, because that's the biggest thing is you want it to, not to borrow from Marie Kondo, but it's got to spark some joy in you. If it doesn't, then but it's our job to show them how to spark that joy. And I get it. It's not by playing on Zoom 6 feet apart and doing all like that. That had its moment. We were lucky that we had the access to technology, because if you can imagine that happening another point, I think we'd be even worse off, you know?
That's totally true. And how do you think AI is affecting us? The other day, a friend of mine made me some songs and later confessed that they were all just AI generated and they sound just like it's like a real band.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it's something sadly that I don't know if we can really fight it. I mean, what I would really like to see, if there's a way you could get AI to do all my Sibelius stuff for me, then I'm sign me up for that, then I'm all right with it. But until then, the artistic part of it, right? Or that's what's really hard to to get past, the fact that you can just have AI compose a song for you. But are you really getting anything out of that? You know, why bother? I would just like go and watch Netflix. I'm not gonna I'm gonna have AI write me something and then pass it off on my own as my own, or I, what what's the point of that? For me, it's all about the creative process, and however long it takes, that's, that's it is what it is, but if we can find creative ways to, perpetuate what we're doing. So for example, and I mean, I have to give it up to one of my students. So he's, he's in his like first year here, and he's on Instagram. He's got a lot of followers, but he does this thing where he like every like few days or so, he posts a sax lick in like, some like a 2-5-1 pattern. And so he asked me, would you want to do one with me? And I said, yeah, sure. That'd be fun. So like we take a 2-5-1. And like I wrote like the first 2 bars, he wrote the second 2 bars, and then we play it, he posts it, and then people want to learn it, because he's got like, I don't know, 10,000 plus followers, and a lot of them are in junior high school. They're just learning how to play jazz. And this is something that he can do in real time. And so he'll post it. And then if you want a copy of the saxophone lick, then he just sends it to you. And it's fun and it's creative, and you're exchanging information, So I think if more people are doing things like this, especially young people, because that again, it's accessible. So they feel like, oh, this person is not much older than me and he's doing this, I can do it too. So if we have that I can do it too mentality,
Yeah.
why not? But yeah, AI is here. I mean, it's like a giant pink elephant in the room. We can't ignore it, right? I haven't really found any use for it in my teaching at this point. I'm really just teaching private instruction. But if there's a way that it would make, certain things easier for me in terms of preparing music, I'm here for it. Otherwise, I don't really see myself utilizing it for too much. But if people can utilize it to their benefit, I'm here for it. But like I see when people are, complaining about AI generated art and that sort of thing. I mean, it's really hard to fight it. I mean, we've been trying to fight it in terms of our music being, pirated and streamed and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, it's just like another level of this stuff, right? I mean, you got a million plays on Spotify, but it's all like fractions of a penny. So you get $2 or whatever. It's sadly untenable. So what are you going to do? I mean, it's hard to fight those big systems like that. So the only thing that I have really power over is what I can do on the instrument and what I can say as a person. You know.
that really the point of music and in terms of connecting to humanity is to be a person and to let people see you and know you and to build
Yes.
your communities and your relationships. And so that's how you fight AI, in my opinion, is by being,
Absolutely. I'm right with you.
you know,
Community,
it's community.
humanity, those were the things that we were missing during COVID. So it's important we don't forget that, you know.
Yeah. If somebody was listening to this podcast and really amazed by your story, what would you tell them to play a wind instrument right now?
Well, I think there's a certain sense of power in the fact that, especially when it comes to a wind instrument, you are putting your breath, your soul, your body into this tube, right? This tube, and it's what comes out is your voice. The tube, the instrument, this is just the vehicle of expression, or the medium, if you will. It's you that's the one who is generating all of the energy, the sound, the feeling, the emotion, all of that. That's coming from you. I'm telling you, there's nothing that beats that feeling in this world. I mean, there's a couple things that come close, you know. For me, I'm like super into long distance running. So like if I'm running a race and when I cross that finish line, there's really not a lot of things that come close to that. But I have to say, it's like I get that same feeling when I play an instrument, and you get that kickback. I don't know. That's what I call it. There's a kickback that I get when I play the saxophone that I just don't get if I sit at the piano. And again, everyone connects to the music in a different way. But as far as a wind instrument goes, it's very, very unique in that you get to breathe into this thing and then music comes out of it. Like, how cool is that?